Hi, everyone. Welcome to Women's Work, Making Your Voice Heard this election. I'm Janée Woods Weber, Executive Director of Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund. We're a nonprofit here in Connecticut. Using a justice and equity lens, we advocate for under-resourced and marginalized women and girls. We work to close the civil legal justice gap and to create state policy for economic security. We are gearing up to celebrate our 50th anniversary next year, and that has given us a lot of opportunity to pause and reflect on the decades of wonderful work that we've done here in Connecticut. And one of the things that we realized is that we wanted to bring community in closer to the policy work that we do up at the Capitol. And toward that end, we recently hired our first community organizer, Jeniffer Perez Caraballo, who is here with us today. And Jen will walk us through the 2022 voter guide, and we will also be joined by Madeline Granato, our policy director. And together we're going to have a conversation about what's in the voter guide, how to use it, and how you can advocate and organize your community this election season. So with that in mind, Jen, thank you so much for being with us today. It's such a pleasure to be working with you the last few months. I think it would be really wonderful if you talked with us a little bit about why community organizing is important, especially in the context of elections. Jen, I think you're muted.
I am. There goes that. Well, so first, I've been enjoying my time here at CWEALF. So thank you so much for having me. It's been so great to work alongside y'all. And community organizing, I mean, it's super important, I think, every day. Let's be real, right? When we organize, we want to build things that last a long time, and so they last past the elections, right? And when it comes to elections, it's super important that we continue to do community organizing. And we talked a little bit about this in the voter guide, but everything from supporting your community to actually be able to make it to the polls, right? Everything from registration, making sure that everyone is registered to vote, that everyone knows where they're voting, voter education, right? Making sure that everyone has access to be able to find transportation, right? Childcare, things like that. That all takes systems of humans working together, right? And strategizing different things. So I think community organizing is absolutely always essential to like on an everyday basis, and for voting it's just another day when it comes to organizing, right? And making sure that our community, one, has their voice heard, two, is actually able to be educated when we go to have our voices heard. So we have the right things that we need. We have the tools, we have the information. We can walk in there with confidence, right? We can advocate for ourselves, and then of course that we can actually get there. So yeah, absolutely, super important. Thank you.
Thank you. Maddie, you've been at CWEALF now for a while as policy director. And what excites you about bringing organizing into the policy work?
Yeah, I think, what excites me the most about Jen's role and having a community organizing director on our team is really connecting the communities that we serve through our legal education program that serves over 1,000 women a year, right, to our work at the state capitol, and really making sure that what we're advocating for legislatively truly represents the communities that we serve, right, and their voices and their needs, and also respects their wisdom, right, and what they bring to the table. So that's what's really important.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. And Jen, as you were going through the process of creating the voter guide with the communities that we serve in mind, what did you want to make sure was included in the final product?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think most importantly, I will say that I wanted everyone to see themselves, right? So I'm from Hartford. I was born and raised. I'm Puerto Rican, and so diversity is kind of like the only thing that I know that exists, right? And so the most important part is that we really, really, really wanted to make sure that people saw themselves. So we have folks of all different body types, all different races, ethnicities, cultural traditions, and it's obvious. because this is what Connecticut women look like, right? Another thing we wanted to make sure is that we really, really wanted folks to understand that advocacy and organizing were things that were super duper important to civic engagement in general, to the voter process. And so we made it a point to highlight that. In blue, you will find advocacy tips. In green, you will find organizing tips. And because we made this for communities like the one that I was raised in, out of the north end of Hartford, so we went ahead and included some hot tips. So if there were things that you just, you couldn't have the time to read through the entire 13 pages, you could look at those hot tips, and you're going to find things that our communities have been hearing in regards to voting. You're going to find myths that are being busted. You're going to find things that are going to give you, tools to be able to advocate for yourself and be able to navigate this process and help others navigate this process. And, I am a neurodivergent person myself. I'm very, very vocal about that. And so as a person with ADHD, I really wanted it to be beautiful. Because nothing keeps my attention like a beautiful document. And, we really should work with communities and with people. And so we made sure that it was one pages, right? Each one is a one pager, because we are facing a tough time economically, right? Where we're strapped for a lot of different things. And so if your organization or you're a community organizer or you're just a student, right? And you're on your campus and you don't have a lot of resources or a lot of money, you could just print your favorite pages. If you're like me and you just kind of bounce around, you can also do that. You don't have to read it beginning to end. So truly, I just wanted this to be a tool that a lot of people could use, that they can see themselves in. And that's why we also included stories of local Connecticut women who have done incredible things, who like Carrie Saxon Perry, who just passed away in 2018 and was the first Black woman to serve as a mayor of a major city, right, in New England. And we don't know their names as much as we should. So we included that as well. Oh, Janée, you're muted.
There's really a lot in this guide, and I really appreciate you pointing out how the advocacy tips are in blue, the organizing tips are in green, and the hot tips are in hot pink. I'm wondering if you could walk us through what are some of the tips and resources that are in this guide to help voters be prepared and informed on Election Day, which is just a little bit over a month away. What is on some of these pages around, key dates or what to do on Election Day? Jen, now you're muted.
We will be doing this entire time. So first and foremost, I want to point out a couple things about the voter guide. You'll see it right in the beginning of our cover, right? You're going to see a QR code in each one of these pages. It is so important that we know this. This QR code links everyone to the entire voter guide, including the Spanish voter guide, and an entire list of resources that Maddie worked so hard to put together. Anything the voter can possibly ever need that's online, Maddie has linked it to that. And so appreciative for that. And that's all in there through that QR code, which is another point as to why you can literally print it as a one pager, right? So what we have some important voter dates, right? So you're gonna see that as you're moving through the guide. It's gonna open up with, first we have the first page. Then we're gonna have a guide to how you can actually read the entire page. From there, we have included a QR code reader, both how to use it and how to create your own thing, because we really want to give folks tools, right? And so if we're asking folks to organize, if we're asking folks to advocate, we also want to give them actual tools to be able to do that work with. From there, we have a visioning of what does it look like for women's economic security. We're really trying to bring women into women's economic security from a point of visioning.
You mentioned in this guide that we are highlighting women who were very strong advocates and organizers in Connecticut. Can you talk a little bit more about one of the women in particular who's in the guide, Maria Sanchez?
Sure, I certainly can talk about her actually. So Maria Sanchez is actually she's like an OG community organizer, is what I like to say. One of the folks whose name has been lifted and kept alive predominantly by Puerto Ricans in Hartford, right? And so she was a woman who came from Puerto Rico. She lived in the north end of Hartford, in the apartments that I grew up in afterwards. And she organized from a bodega, things like, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and, worked alongside her community and other women of her time to organize. And together, we're part of the reasons why so many Puerto Ricans were able to register to vote. So that's someone who I grew up with, knowing, someone whose apartment I lived in, and actually at one point she was even like the ghost story in my house, right? But whose story I still didn't fully grasp until I did my own research. And so we're reclaiming those stories, we're really putting them out there, and we're putting them loud, so that folks can know that we're asking you to do something that has been done before, right? And we're inviting you into this work.
Hmm. Let's take it back to basics for a minute, because we've been talking about advocacy and organizing, and we just highlighted, a really important woman who advocated and organized to help the Puerto Rican community, understand and really take advantage of the power of voting. But when we talk about advocacy and organizing, we tend to do so in the same breath. But how are they different? And how do they matter as communities prepare to go to the polls?
Sure. Maddie, do you want to talk a little bit more about advocacy?
Sure. So when we advocate, right, we are, thinking through what can we do to, move an issue forward, either like in our personal lives, in our professional lives. We advocate for ourselves, we advocate for our community. And Jen can definitely speak right more to the organizing perspective. But when we think of advocacy, we think of activities like, writing testimony, contacting your legislator, all these things that are talking to your candidates, right, during the election cycle. These are all these things that can really influence change, like for yourself, for your neighbors, for your families, et cetera. So that's how we think of, I think, advocating.
Mm-hmm. And I know in the guide, we've highlighted some key issue areas that we hope people will advocate around, that they will talk to their candidates about paid sick days, about fair work week, about the importance of paid family and medical leave. So we've got advocacy covered. What does it mean to organize around these issues, Jen?
And thank you so much. And I think this is a good image to land on too, because what you see with like advocacy, you have that voice, right? You're using your voice, you're using words. And when you're doing organizing, what you're doing is you're stringing together a bunch of advocates, right? And you're strategizing. You're bringing folks together who have a stake in the game, and together you are creating, you're kind of creating the path that you're going to take, and mapping out how you're going to make that win, how you're going to make that change. And so we did this. I like to think of it, for many of us, advocacy only goes so far, right? We do have to like name that. When you have been systematically left out, on purpose, then your voice, folks get trained to not hear your voice anymore. And so advocacy, while really super duper important, right, to our work, and it's super important to like our own personal development, and also like to make sure we have the right messaging, which you'll see here. We're giving you scripts that you guys can follow along, right? At the same time, that it has its limits, and we honor that. And so that's when we say organizing can really be a path forward, because it allows folks who have been systematically marginalized, whose voices we have been trained to not hear, to come together and find out how they're going to make the change that they need for their lives. And so I think that's how we kind of differentiate a little bit. And so we make organizing less scary, though, because we're just like, y'all, here, table. This might be one of your first steps, collect contact information. And so I hope that really helps explain a little bit about how we see organizing and how we see advocacy, and how the entire, voter guide is framed.
And how does that, Maddie, help people understand why it's important to take action on specific policy priorities as we prepare to vote?
Yeah, so what I love most about our voter guide is, I think it really is digestible for people, and it gives you a whole range of options, right, for a way to take action and involve yourself and your community. Whether you're, an advocate, or you want to, like Jen mentioned, on the broader scale, organize, your people, your networks. I think our guide really does a really great job of walking through, what you can do now to support our policy priorities, like paid sick days, paid family medical leave, fair work week, as you're talking to candidates, as you're preparing yourself to vote. But it makes a case that voting is not the end, right, of your advocacy or your organizing journey. It's really just the beginning, or it's even, it's somewhere in the middle. The work really starts after the election, and that's when we can all come together, right, and really work hard to make the changes, that we outline in our voter guide.
And to Maddie's point, we have some great one-pagers at the end of this voter guide that have to do with the policy priorities that we're going to be working on and that we have been working on and pushing forward. And so that's a place where you can organize your community to print those out and pass them out to, your family members, your community members, at your churches, to the politicians that at your school events, anywhere that you think that folks might be able to use that information and need it. So there's something you can do with this voter guide post-voting. Like we said, we really, really want to make sure that we guide the voter through the entire process. And part of the process is what happens after that, right? What's on the other side of when we vote, because that's not the end all and be all. So thank you for that.
So Jen, can you offer a few more specific ways on how people can put this guide to work for them? You mentioned some different ways people can use it to, get the word out to folks in their community. But what about when they want to talk to candidates about the issues that they care about or the policy priorities that we've included in this guide as examples for folks?
Yes, absolutely. So what you're going to see in those one-pagers is some questions that you can ask your candidates that are policy specific, but really like you can use these questions to frame, some of the other issues that you are working on locally, which, by the way, we'd love to know what you're working on locally when it comes to women's economic security. And so that's one way we can all work together, right? And so that's what you're going to find in the voter guide as well. And something to think about too, if you are like me and you are an organizer and you are someone who guides folks through processes locally, right? As you are using this to educate folks on how to vote and like how to use their voice and how to organize to be able to get the vote out, right? Let them know that this, they can use this guide pretty much as a game board, right? From beginning to end, this is how the average voter a woman voter in Connecticut, comes across the system. We take you through like what we think you need to be able to maneuver the guide. We give you the QR codes. From there, we go ahead and tell you, here's what you can think about before voting. Here's what you can do on the day of voting. And then we say, here's some priorities that are like really important for y'all to know about. And this is how you talk about it. And then on top of that, here is how you can do something about it. And so I think super important when you're talking to both the candidates, right? But also folks who are working in the campaigns as you're talking to your neighbors, is to let them know that there is also a voter guide out there that helps folks through the entire voter process.
And this voter guide also offers an action step for people to take. There's a pledge. Maddie, would you like to talk about the pledge?
Yes, so a really easy way to show your support, not only for CWEALF, but for our guide, for all of the issues, right, that we're working really hard on, is to take our voter pledge. It's just really short. You just add your name, and by doing so, you're pledging to vote for women's economic security, and for candidates, right, that will support policies like paid sick days, fair work week, and we'll commit to continuing to support paid family medical leave. So we have a really strong program in our state, and we want to make sure that it continues and even gets better, right? So,
yeah, I really encourage everyone to take the pledge and to share this guide with your friends. Mail it out in your email or text it to 5 people that you know. I hope that you will also sign up to follow CWEALF on our social media so you can get updates from us in real time about what we're doing around Election Day, and to get more information about our policy priorities and to find out how to take action after the election, because as has been stressed by Jen and Maddie, Election Day is not the end of the journey. There's still a lot more work to do after that to make sure that we get the policies and solutions that our communities deserve. So I do hope that you will take us up on the invitation to become connected with us. And of course, we are always very, very grateful for the supporters who help us make this work possible. We do require different kinds of support in addition to, showing up with us to advocate at the Capitol and signing up for our newsletter. We do also really appreciate when people support us with donations. Small donations matter. Small donations of $5 to $10 help us keep this work going. They help us create tools like this for communities to advocate for themselves. And we do hope that you will continue to be in relationship with us. We look forward to seeing you on Election Day, which is November 8th. Make a plan to vote. If you need an absentee ballot, make sure that you get ahead of that and you request your ballot now. And we'll see you at the polls, and then we'll see you at the Capitol. The session starts on January 4th, and we hope that you will be there with us advocating and organizing so that together we can create the world that women and girls deserve. Thank you, Jen and Maddie, for sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you.